Welcome to NextGen Timber, where dead trees split without warning, overloaded winches fight beyond their limit, and every cut is a direct challenge against gravity. This is not clean commercial forestry on flat, safe ground. This is real timber work, where machines, cables, operators, and terrain all get tested at the same time. One hard pull, and that old stump suddenly comes alive again. The ground starts cracking, buried roots begin snapping underground, and chunks of dirt blast into the air as the winch drags the rotten base out of the yard. It looks less like stump removal and more like the machine is tearing a piece of the earth loose. Then the forestry mulcher moves in and completely changes the scene. Thick undergrowth, small trees, tangled vegetation, all of it gets ripped apart by spinning steel teeth. Dirt, wood chips, and shredded brush explode across the clearing as untouched woodland disappears in seconds. That is not gentle land clearing. That is hydraulic destruction with a purpose. Next, the high-speed stump grinder drops onto an old tree base and starts eating through hardened wood instantly. The cutting wheel screams through the stump, throwing sawdust and splinters everywhere. What used to take hours of manual labor is reduced to shredded wood beneath the machine. Fast, loud, brutal, and efficient. Then the pace slows down with a pair of powerful draft horses pulling timber the old-fashioned way. No diesel smoke, no hydraulic noise, no tracks tearing up the ground. Just steady steps, controlled strength, and massive logs sliding through mud, roots, and rough woodland terrain. It is traditional, but it still works. After that, the industrial wood chipper takes over. Entire logs disappear into the feed system, while steel blades inside tear solid timber into flying debris. In seconds, heavy raw wood becomes mountains of processed material. That is the difference between cutting timber and consuming it. Then the Cranman Bison 10000X rolls in like a compact forestry factory. Cutting, lifting, feeding, and processing are all built into one machine. Instead of workers fighting every log by hand, the machine turns difficult timber handling into a streamlined mechanical operation. But then the danger returns fast. One final cut, and the entire pine gives way. The trunk crashes along the saw line, then starts sliding uncontrollably down the steep slope, tearing through leaves, branches, and loose ground like a timber avalanche. For a few seconds, the logger is trapped only feet away from thousands of pounds of moving wood, scrambling backward as the trunk thunders toward the ravine. Another stump grinder follows, and again the machine tears into the thick base with brutal force. Steel teeth rip through solid wood, throwing dirt, bark, and shredded timber in every direction. Within moments, a stump that once looked permanent is reduced to broken debris below the surface. Then the sawmill carriage locks onto a raw log and drives it toward the blade. Thick slabs peel away under industrial force while sawdust fills the workshop air. This is where raw timber starts turning into usable material, not with drama, but with pressure, precision, and controlled cutting power. Then we see what real experience looks like. In the hands of a skilled logger, giant timber is not just something dangerous. It becomes a technical problem. Positioning, timing, force control, and judgment all come together before the tree ever starts moving. The next grinding wheel hits another stump at full speed, blasting dirt, roots, and shattered wood into the air. It tears through buried timber like a saw through concrete, proving again that modern forestry equipment does not negotiate with old roots. Then a massive skidder drags multiple giant trunks across torn-up logging ground. Mud, bark, and debris grind under the oversized tires, while thousands of pounds of timber scrape violently behind it. Every foot forward is a fight for traction. Then comes one of the worst setups imaginable. No protective gear, a ladder, and a partially split tree hanging under tension. That is not forestry anymore. That is a disaster waiting for timing. Tree removal near houses and roads changes everything. Every cut has to account for balance, hinge strength, lean direction, escape space, and nearby structures. One uncontrolled fall can destroy property in seconds, and there is no rewind once the trunk starts moving. Then the Hayes HDX winch system takes over near Henderson Lake, working like a giant stabilizing mechanism. It controls movement across dangerous terrain where one uncontrolled slide could destroy everything downhill. In that kind of environment, the winch is not just pulling, it is keeping the entire operation alive. Then we get pure old-school logging culture with the 1987 Peterbilt 359. Classic nose, heavy frame, raw diesel power, the kind of truck built to survive brutal Manitoba forest roads before modern electronics took over. Not polished, not delicate, just built to work. Then comes one of the harsh truths of logging. A fallen tree can still hurt you badly after it hits the ground. Recoil can travel back through the trunk, shift pressure, throw material, and hit anyone standing too close. In this work, danger does not end when the tree lands. The first tree already shows how quickly things can spiral. That evergreen oak did not just threaten to fall. It nearly wiped out far more than the crew expected. One small error in angle or timing, and the whole operation could have turned catastrophic. Then the next tree gets worse because it is hollow and actively burning inside. Every cut becomes a calculation against collapse, hidden weak spots, trapped heat, and unpredictable movement. This is no longer standard tree felling. This is controlled survival under pressure. Public safety becomes the next focus. Near roads, homes, and infrastructure, logging is not just about cutting timber. It becomes risk management. Every decision is about protecting the fall zone and everything around it. Then the Cambio 800 and Sim 750 combination starts tearing through timber like an industrial processing beast. Raw logs disappear into the system, and finished material shoots out almost instantly. Fast feeding, clean output, non-stop mechanical rhythm, exactly the efficiency large-scale timber crews depend on. But even with good equipment, communication can fall apart. Somebody disconnects in the middle of the job while the crew is still coordinating movement around the cut zone. In forestry, confusion spreads fast, and bad communication can become just as dangerous as the tree itself. Then the forest hits back again. One bad branch movement, and suddenly the tree lashes toward the cutter like it is fighting back. Logging punishes overconfidence immediately. One of the most violent moments comes when a cedar trunk bursts apart lengthwise under internal pressure. The split tears through the wood so violently it almost looks unreal. That is stored force releasing faster than anyone can control. The next warning matters. If you ever see a recovery setup under heavy tension, stay away and let professionals handle it. Cables, chains, and winches do not fail quietly under load. They fail violently. And honestly, some operators should not be anywhere near a chainsaw. Sometimes the stance, saw handling, and body position tell you everything. If someone looks unprepared before the tree even moves, the risk is already too high. A few moments later, the whole crew starts shouting because the trunk finally begins moving. Everyone watches the fall path at once, waiting to see whether the tree follows the plan or turns into chaos. That is why protective equipment matters. Helmets, harnesses, eye protection, escape paths, none of it is optional once heavy timber starts moving under load. Then exactly what everyone feared finally happens. The cut sends the trunk shifting in the wrong direction, and the panic starts before the tree even finishes moving. Everyone watching knows somebody could get seriously hurt. Then the heavy forwarder claws its way up a steep, muddy forest slope, rear crane gripping a full load of timber. Every tire fights for traction while tons of fresh logs sway behind the machine. That is heavy hauling with no room for weak control. The GV75 winch system starts pulling under massive load, and the chassis transfers weight away from the front axle. Once the front end loses traction, the whole vehicle starts fighting for control. In muddy Balkan terrain, this is what happens when operators are forced to pull at maximum force. Finally, the tension starts to drop. The crew guides the load into place. The machinery settles down. After all the noise, recoil, pressure, and risk, the operation finally comes together the way it was supposed to. That is NextGen Timber. Exploding cedar trunks, overloaded winches, snapping chains, burning hollow trees, classic logging trucks, brutal forestry equipment, and crews fighting gravity every day in the deep wilderness.